Okay, so today I'm going to talk about the role of the psyche in spiritual awakening and how it has manifested in my life, right? Because awakening is kind of unique for everyone. The way it moves, like as you, through you, is going to have its own unique qualities. So I'll start with this statement. Classically, spiritual awakening is an awakening to the actual experiential realization of yourself being beyond the ego. So that for many people begins as the witnessing consciousness, disidentifying from the mind, and literally experiencing yourself to be a witness, witnessing the mind, witnessing the ego. In my story, the awakening I had was a realization of, it was interesting. It was like simultaneous things, because ultimately the Buddha's teaching of no self means no soul, right? Like no experiencer, right? No, just life itself. But what I experienced was, and by the way, there's always an experiencer, even when there isn't, because at some level, anybody who has been able to speak about this, it registered somewhere, right? It has to register to some I in order to be able to discuss it, right? In order for it to be shared. So what I experienced was like that I was nothing, that I was everything, that I was love, that I felt my soul to be like this ball of light that had music and had certain qualities. And then I had a very deep like seeing of everything being ecstatic spirit. So this might sound crazy, but when I was walking outside, people would walk by me and they would shapeshift into different people, or they would pull a gun out at me because my mind was trying to scare me, because I was realizing that this world of form, in a way, is kind of vaporous. It's not really solid. We know that we're 99.99999% space. And so I was seeing that, like I was seeing that reality. But after that kind of wore off, after a few months, I settled in as the witness, which the witnessing consciousness, some people say that that's the soul, although to be honest, I feel soul to be a little different than the witnessing consciousness, but so the witnessing consciousness, it's like I felt myself that I literally was back here. I felt myself as literally being back here. So there was still a separation, like there was still an identity with awareness, with the witness. I am not the body, I am not the mind, but God or spirit or us, is everything, is the ego, is the seeker, is the dog shit, is the, it's everything in every state of energy, is ecstatic bliss. And so there was still, though, like this separation from the body, right? There was still an identification, and it felt very mystical, because I wasn't only identified as awareness, because I was still aware of spirit. Spirit and soul are different. Spirit, soul, or the witness is like, it's like silence. It's like silent awareness. And when I would be like, I didn't dream for a while, I would be in deep sleep, and it was almost like, it felt like just being there, just silent awareness. So I didn't dream. There was no movements of my mind while my body was asleep, but I was completely aware in sleep, and I was aware during surgery. And so I wasn't completely only identified with the witness, but it was more of my identification, I can only attempt to describe this, was as the witness. But I was still aware of the ecstatic bliss of reality, because I would go outside and I would hear the music or the geometry of everything, of humans, and over the last 3 years of my life, I experienced like a pretty hardcore initiation and challenges that brought all of that ecstatic bliss a little bit outside of my, like it stopped being my full experience, because more attention was put on going into the mind to bring the energies of the psyche, to raise the energies or the shadow frequencies of the psyche into higher states of energy by becoming aware of them, and in some cases doing a little more investigation. So that's what I teach, because from what I've seen and the way that it has played out for me, I can't tell you what to do. I can't tell you what's right. I can't tell you, work with your mind or don't work with your mind. I'm sure, I've heard of people who had awakenings where their whole conditioning disappeared. That was not the case for me. It just wasn't. In fact, the gap between my realization, not my realization, and the states of energy of certain parts of my mind, the gap was so wide that it was actually physiologically uncomfortable. Because, for example, parts of me were still doing like severe self-harming behavior. It was painful to feel that difference between that reality and then zooming into a very painful reality. Ultimately, that taught me a very deep level of love, because I realized like even the most despicable parts of me, what my mind was calling despicable, right? Parts of me that were hurting myself, parts of me that couldn't stop abusing myself, were lovable. And so the purpose of this conversation is to just share like what I see as the role of touching the psyche. And you could say, well, life is doing it. What's the purpose of a spiritual practice if like everything's just gonna happen? We don't. And here's the thing though, we are spirit too. Our impulse to do a practice is spirit too. Our impulse to become involved is spirit moving. If you use a spiritual concept like, well, everything just happens and I'll just sit back, like you're gonna feel discomfort, or stuff is gonna get out of balance, because there's a dance between your involvement and your lack of involvement, or you're stepping back and surrendering and you're, doing a little investigation. So I share some of the fruits of my investigations and the fruits of the investigations that I do for others. So for me, at least for me, what happened through me was that spirit, it's like, yes, I know what I am. Yes, I have lots of mystical experiences, but what's deeply in my heart, like what deeply wants to happen is just to be fully human and divine, like bring the divinity into the human experience. And so that means having spirit touch the corners of the mind that have been forgotten, that have been put in the shadow, right? That have been pushed out of our awareness. Because what would happen if you didn't do that is that you would have these big gaps where you might be in a realization that you're the whole universe, but meanwhile, right, maybe you're in a relationship where somebody's beating you or stuff like that, right? And so there's a lack of harmony there, because when well-being and love has been has descended into the levels of your being, right? There's subtle bodies above the mental body, but it's like there's the mental body and the astral body and the etheric body. Like if you're only out there in the Buddhic body, right, and then it hasn't descended into the crystal of the physical body, the physical body is still going to run on what's in the mental and emotional planes, and it's going to be uncomfortable for you. And I don't believe in struggle. I believe in alignment and ease. And so I'm very passionate about it. What's so interesting, right? For me, after having looked at so many very, very deep patterns in myself, what happened is the energies that were not aligned with awakening, right? We're not in the realization, we're not in a state of energy that was compatible with awakening. It was compatible because it drove the desire for more awakening, but you know what I mean, right? It's like there were certain parts of the mind vibrating at all these different frequencies. By me looking at them, you know, inquiring into them and why they're in that state of energy, and just simply sometimes just seeing something clearly clears it. Sometimes understanding more about it is what is needed. You have to intuitively figure that out, and ultimately you always do. But for me, that was essential. And, you know, I was led to learn very interesting things, but the point is, if you leave your mind untouched, and for a lot of people, that means if you refuse to feel, if you refuse to see something, you're only as free to the degree that you're willing to see. What's not free about you, right? What's locked in beliefs that are created out of fear. You can't sustain a lot of energy, right? There is an energetic, often, I can't speak for everyone, but there's an energetic component to a genuine spiritual awakening where there is a sort of mutation of the DNA. I did a process where I looked at the relationship between my male and female, my inner male and female energies, and I basically had them, I understood their perspectives, and there was a healing that took place between them. And when they came together, right, they merged and they became, like, I saw in my mind like a DNA strand. And what I understood was like, wow, these patterns, these understandings of how to be a manipulative female, what male energy means, how to be controlling in this way, the battle between the mind and the emotions, which is the male and the female. Like, this battle or Armageddon has been going on since the beginning of time, and awakening, the love of awakening is going into these misunderstandings and healing them, and it changes the DNA, right? And it changes my physiology. I have a video called My Experience with Kundalini Awakening, and I describe some of the physiological things I feel. But if I did not do, but if it did not happen, right, that the healing occurred, right, in the psyche, then my body would not be able to tolerate this amount of energy. It would be harder on me, because when you have an energy symptom that's really severe, it's really about the emotional block, you could say, that's in that chakra. So, you know, if you have a strong energetic awakening, it's kind of inevitable that you will have, well, it's not, I can't say that it's inevitable, you know, I don't really know what it's like for a lot of people, but I know for me, I had different phenomena and symptoms in every chakra, right? A lot of stuff in my brain, electricity in my brain, stuff with my vision, you know, in my third eye opening, saw myself dying, you know, 24 hours a day for 7 months. Just, that's all I saw in my mind's eye. I see the color blue, like, I see light before I see form. There's like a drag in time. there's stuff happens with my throat, with my lymph nodes. I get heart palpitations, but it's actually heart chakra palpitations, because I mean, my friend pointed it out to me. He was like, look, feel your physical heart. First of all, if it's in the center, it's the heart chakra, right? So sometimes the chakra speeds up and it releases content. And so when spirit is pouring, it's like when you pour water in a dirty cup. When spirit is pouring through a chakra, it's going to release stuff, just like when you cleanse your liver and your liver releases toxins, right? Well, so the point is, what makes this all easier, you know, I had a spontaneous awakening where I had not done any preparation in this life to prepare my body. And essentially that means prepare my mind, because the body is a reflection of the mind, to receive the energy. And ultimately it was all perfect, but it's difficult to sustain awakening in the physical body unless the mind is in alignment with awakening. So again, I can't tell you how much to interact with your mind, what to do with it. You know, it's not about healing. There's nothing broken. There's just like it's just a physical law that if part of you is vibrating in an understanding of complete helplessness, right? The 3-year-old. So when I hear teachers saying like, well, yeah, realization is complete and it's always complete. You can't unknow what you are. But that doesn't mean that sometimes your 3-year-old doesn't come out and scream. And part of me just didn't agree with that. I'm like, I don't mind being a 3-year. I don't have a desire to be perfect, but some impulse from within me said, but it's possible to bring a kind of realization to the 3-year-old that believes it has no option to leave, or that it must be angry to protect itself, or that, you know, it doesn't have, it is attracted to violence because that's all it has ever known. Like, I don't agree with that. That's from my heart. I don't agree with that. I agree that there can be a very deep integration of spirit into the psyche. And I believe that's just happening naturally. That's a phenomenon that's occurring as part of our natural evolution. So in my experience, you know, even at the beginning of my awakening, I used my mind, or I should say, I focused my mind in ways that I very easily, I detached from things. I didn't hold on to things anymore. But there is conscious resistance and there is unconscious resistance. And unconscious resistance is never completely unconscious because it never feels like freedom, right? So it's like if you're in a relationship that you know has been feeling off, but you haven't made the decision to leave. You knew the whole time that it felt off. You did know, but you didn't act on it because of possibly many holding patterns in your subconscious. And so while everything is perfect and everything is divine and everything will unfold in perfect timing, like, don't let that idea prevent you from being a little bit more involved in your awakening. That's just how I see it. And I spend a lot of time in a state where I don't even feel like that all the words that I'm saying right now are meaningless, that there's just such an amazing perfection to life. But then there's a realization, but wait, when I zoom back into my personal life, that's spirit too. It's spirit as well too. You know, when you're interacting in relationships, intimate relationships are where our deepest wounds are revealed to us. And I mean, I just don't buy it that if you had such an amazing spiritual awakening, but in relationship, there's, you know, all sorts of weird or deception or whatever going on, then it hasn't reached that level of mind. And at least in my heart, there's a desire to to reach the corners of my psyche so that all of me, my spirit and mind and emotions, and can be in alignment with love and unity. And that doesn't mean never having an emotion that's less than that. There are volcanoes in nature, you know, the Zen masters, you know, slap their students with sticks, but it's usually just a spontaneous occurrence. It's not a pattern. It's not a pattern of resistance. So, you know, it's also very common, and I see this, this is so prevalent. People use the idea that it's just my karma. I'm meant to be here. I'm meant to experience this, to keep them in a situation where if they let go of that thought, it would change, because we live in the plane of change, and it's actually not normal to stay the same, to repeat. When I go into people's chakras and I ask their deep intuition about what they believe about life or themselves that keeps them locked in certain states of being, they say things like, I deeply believe that this is my fate. This is my destiny. And here's a clue. If that thought makes you feel dead inside, it's a lie. If it makes you feel like aligned with things unfolding in your life, okay, let yourself have it, right? But I've seen all too many times that people believe, this is a very deep belief, and this is from many lifetimes of spiritual conditioning, that it's just sitting back and letting things unfold. But the thing is that spirit is moving also as your desire to get involved. That's not, the will of God is involved in its own unfolding and its own realization, right? And that's not only sitting back and watching, it's everything. It's everything. And intuitively, you'll just know the right thing to do, right? Sometimes seeing something in a very crystal clear way makes it combust. Sometimes there needs to be a little bit more investigation, particularly if there was something that you gestated in, if you were in an energy field before you could have cognition, right? Before you could have conscious thought, you might be so familiar with danger and chaos and turbulence and stress that it will actually feel like, it will feel familiar to you. It will feel, and what is familiar to us equals God to us, because we desire God more than anything. But before, when we're separate and we're babies, we equate our families with God. So anything that is familiar to us is God. So on a deep level, we believe God is chaos. God is violence. And so we accept, we tolerate, we attract, we create more situations from that understanding. And karma is only a belief. Karma is only a habit of belief that stems from the idea that you're a separate self. But guess what? If you leave your mind to play out its karma and don't touch it, it will still create with all of those beliefs. And you could bliss yourself out. You could stay in the higher realms and just watch it all play out like a funny joke, or you can merge the worlds. You know, you can bring your spirit into matter, and that's my message. And I teach, you know, how to do that, the ways that we prevent it, the ways that we block it. And I will talk more about this, about the ways we avoid ourselves, we avoid reality, we avoid our emotions. And then I'll teach you really how to feel, because I came through, in bringing the fragments of my psyche back together, very severe fragmentation, quite severe disassociation, which my spiritual awakening actually reinforced, and lots of chaos, right? One fragment of myself with bulimia, while the rest of me is blissed out in one fragment of myself, just like totally confused and in a daze, lost in codependency. And all of the denial of these things over time caused outbursts of rage that really, really temporarily destroyed my health. And I'm very healthy now. I have no health issues anymore. But I have gone through the process of bringing the fragments back together and of being willing to feel those forces of emotion that are ultimately the blissful life energy, just trying to set you free. Emotions are trying to set you free. They're echoes of the past. The reason why they're uncomfortable is because the past shouldn't be what's comfortable to you. It's alerting you, like, to pay attention to it, to stop pushing it away so that it can open and repurpose itself into creative energy. So long story short, from my perspective, not even my perspective, the way it's played out in my life is that awakening it's almost like descended into the crystal of my body, right? It's come through the levels. It's come through the levels and it's affecting my DNA. And I'll say as well, you know, just as a side, that can be very uncomfortable. And it's the more uncomfortable an energetic mutation is, that has to do with what your mind is doing, the resistance that's in your mind. And sometimes resistance is completely unavoidable. When the fear of death is being squeezed out of your cells, it's kind of hard to stay comfortable the whole time, right? Just forget about it. Just learn to just like invite discomfort, invite everything, because it's all like the blissful dance of creation, of God, of you consciously incarnating into the physical world. But the energetic component of awakening, you know, I have told some of the stories, but, you know, my experience is to most people would be quite disorienting, because I don't see physical reality. I see it as luminous. I see it as not solid. I see people disappear before my eyes because I'm not looking through physical eyeballs. I'm looking through consciousness. And when somebody retracts their energy and feels rejected, I see them disappear for a second. I see things appear. I see things bleeding through. I have weird physical symptoms that come and go. I can't really drive on highways because when there's a white, you know, a paved road and white sky, or like really clear sky and heat, I feel so merged with that expansive environment that I can hardly feel my body in the car. And so I've had a kind of, an intense curriculum about how to relax, how to trust, how to ground my energy in my physical body, and how to inquire into the mind to allow that energy to be in my body in a stable way, in a comfortable way. So maybe I'll tell more stories about my experiences, because I realized maybe they're useful. You know, for a while I was like, I don't want to come off as trying to look special or trying to, but then I was like, but wait a minute, when I was going through the most severe aspects of this, I looked for people on YouTube. I looked for people that I could look to so that my mind could relax more, you know, because relaxation is one of the most important aspects in life and in spiritual awakening. But I figure, you know, maybe if I can help reduce the fear factor of this amazing gift that's happening, which is our evolution into a new species, if I can reduce the fear factor, shed some light on it, give some guidance, then that just feels like the best thing that I can do, right? It doesn't feel egoic. It feels like it's from my heart. So yeah, if anybody has any specific questions about anything, please feel free to let me know, and I will just continue to share whatever I feel inspired to share. So I love you. Have a good day.